Administration. You can even send in a letter instead of a Form 9, although it works better if you actually send the form. And in that form, you're supposed to say why you disagree with the decision. And they give you the option of either asking for a hearing with the Board of Appeals or asking the Board of Veterans Appeals to decide the case without a hearing, or they give you, they give you a choice of a couple kinds of hearings. You can have a hearing by video, sort of like we're doing now, with a person in Washington, D.C., and you would be at the local VA. Typically in Maine, it would be here at Tovis, although it can be in any Veterans Administration facility. And they also give you the option, if you prefer, to wait until a live person, a person from the board, comes to the facility you're dealing with, again, typically Tovis for cases here in Maine. Or if you want to pursue that option, they will give you the option of going to Washington and appearing before the board at their offices in Washington. So you have those options about a hearing. I always recommend to people, if possible, that they wait and get a person, get a live hearing with a person who is here from the board. My bias is that you make more of a personal connection. They take your case more seriously if you do that. But it isn't always practical. Last year, for example, they canceled all the in-person hearings at Tovis because of their travel budget limitations. So you had a choice of just a video hearing or going to Washington or not having a hearing. And so in those cases, people took video hearings. But regardless of how you do it, I encourage you, if you're pursuing a veterans claim and you get denied or you don't get the benefits you think you're entitled to at the initial stage, to pursue an actual hearing with the board. The board members are usually quite good about listening to what you want to present, about asking you questions that you need to understand in order to know how you see the case and how that's different from the way the VA handled it. They will sometimes be able to explain to you that there are additional things that you should do. You may raise additional issues at the hearing that generate further claims that they will tell you should file. Other things can happen along those lines. But once that happens, once you have the hearing at the board, they will issue a decision there. And typically, one of three things will happen. Either they'll grant the benefits that you asked for, or at least some of them, or they'll send the case back to the regional office saying, gee, I've listened to the veteran, and he makes these points, and I don't think you've considered them enough, and there's this other evidence you might want to try to get to see if we can't clarify this. So that would be what we call a remand. So you can get a grant, you can get a remand, or they can turn you down. If they turn you down in whole or in part, just like at the original level, you have another option for appeal. This time, it's to the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims in Washington. And the process is quite different than these other appeals. Typically, you have to file a written legal brief explaining why procedurally the VA got it wrong. So most people who are at that level will need to get an attorney unless they already have some specialized legal background of their own. But at the other steps, you certainly are free to pursue the claim on your own. There are also service representatives from various organizations, the American Legion, the Maine Bureau of Veteran Services, other agencies have what they call veteran service representatives that have offices at Togus. They'll represent you at no charge, and they will try to help you with your case. Sometimes they can, sometimes they can't, but they will certainly try. They'll give you advice, and they will usually have someone available to attend a hearing with you if you would like to have a hearing. So that's kind of the general procedure. And I'm going to open this up to questions in just a minute, but I did want to make one more point. One of the biggest problems that I see in the cases that come to me are that people will not appeal when they get turned down. Instead, they'll either reapply or they'll just let things go for a long period of time. If it's at all possible, you want to avoid missing the appeal time. The reason for that has to do with the benefits that you can get. As I explained a little earlier, benefits run from the time you start making a claim. So if you don't pursue an appeal and you start over with a new claim, your time for benefits starts over with a new claim. So if you were in the process for 2 years and then decided not to continue with an appeal and to start over, the 2 years of benefits you could have gotten there if you've been successful on appeal just vanish, they go away. And your time for benefits starts with the new claim. So it's important, and I encourage anyone who's pursuing a VA claim to always pursue a timely appeal. You have generous periods of time. You have a year from the original decision to file notice of disagreement. You have 60 days from the time you get the statement of the case to file your Form 9 to perfect the appeal. If you get turned down at the board, you have 4 months, 120 days, to appeal to the court. So there are generous time periods, and it's just important to get something in within those time periods. I think I've covered kind of the general overview. Let me just turn to our VLP host and ask, is there anything else you wanted me to cover in the basics?
No, I think that was a good coverage of the basics. I think I can see if anyone has any questions.
All right, let's open this up for questions then. I'm not really sure of the procedure here, but if somebody wants to chime in, we'll start with them.
Do we have any questions?
Going once?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Can you hear me? We receive individual unemployability benefits that you were describing earlier.
Right. Yeah.
Even though we receive 100% of the monetary benefit from that, there are some other benefits that go along with 100% disability that we are not eligible for, such
Right.
as
Typically educational benefits. Yeah.
Yeah, vehicle registrations, things like that.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, at what point would it be appropriate, and how would we go about applying for the P&T that they require for those 100% benefits that include everything in the package?
Well, what you have to do when you have individual unemployability, as you point out, although they give you the same amount of money as if you were at 100% on the schedule, they don't give you the ancillary benefits. If you want to get the ancillary benefits, the only way to get those is to seek increases on each of the claims until you get to 100% on the schedule. There isn't any other way to do it. So say, for example, I have someone who has a back problem, has a wrist problem, and has secondary depression. You would have to pursue an increase on each of those claims until the combined result on the schedule hits 100%. And as you know, or as you may not know, but let me tell you, the VA doesn't use simple math. They don't say, okay, you have a 50% rating here, a 20% rating here, and a 30% rating here, that's 100. They have what they call a combined rating chart, so that you actually have to add up to more than 100 if you were doing simple math to get to 100 on their combined rating chart. But in answer to your question, the short answer is the only way to do that is to either add additional secondary problems or to seek increases on the conditions that are service connected. One thing that we see a lot is we'll get someone who's been injured and they'll get a rating for that, and they won't be able to do the things that they used to do, and they get pretty depressed. But they won't understand that they could go and apply for a secondary connection for depression. So it's important to look at all of the possible claims that can be made in order to try to get to that magic 100% if you're looking for the ancillary benefits. Does that cover your question?
It does. It's just a little bit confusing because, like you said, they don't use the simple math. So it's hard to say, at what point will the 10 and the 30 and the 80 add up to 100 altogether. It's just
right. There is it's not a secret. They have the chart. You can ask for a copy, and it's if you want to go to the law section of your library, it's in Title 38 of the Code of Federal Regulations. I'm trying to remember now, it's Part 3 or Part 4 that has that, but I think the combined rating chart's in Part 4. But your reference librarian can either show you that book, or if they don't have it, they can get it by interlibrary loan so that you can see the chart and figure out what you have to, how the numbers go together to make that. It's
Okay.
very strange math.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly. Other questions?
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
If you applied and then you were denied, or somehow you let it go,
Yes.
is that going to cause a problem if you apply again? Are there any sort of issues that you should know about?
Well, the way the VA works is actually much more forgiving than the typical legal system. As you probably know, if you're in an auto accident, for example, and you make a claim against someone and you go to trial and get that decided, whatever that decision is, that's the decision, that's the end of it. But the VA system is different. If you make a claim and it's decided and you don't pursue an appeal, you can go back and reapply. The requirement is that you supply what they call new and material evidence. So say, for example, you make an application and you say, I injured my back in the service. And the Veterans Administration says, well, that's right, you injured your back in the service, and you do have a back problem now, but we don't think they're the same problem. We think that you got better and then you injured yourself at work. That's a fairly common scenario. So they turn you down, you don't appeal. You can go back, anytime later, but typically a year, 2, 5, whatever, and reapply. And this time, you go to your doctor and you get a nice letter from him explaining that this really is the same problem. It's related to what happened in the service, and he can tell that because when you were injured in the service, the injury was to say the L3 vertebrae, the lower part of your back, and the problem you're currently having is at exactly that same level, and so he's convinced that even though you had this other back problem at work, that was at a different level and not really why you're having the problem now. So you can actually reopen a claim multiple times as long as you keep adding new material evidence each time until you've successfully persuaded the VA to grant benefits or you give up, whichever comes first.